Dimitri, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Hegel. Good morning, everyone. This is Tantric Hegel, the most fascinating Phallus. The point of this presentation is to introduce you to what happens when you clash the notions of Tantra and Hegel together, where you get a Tantric Hegel and you also get a Hegelian Tantra, which Alexander Barth claims will be the Tantra of the future. So first I'll talk about spiritual practice and the aims of it and what we're doing when we're doing spiritual practice. Secondly, I'm going to talk about Tantra and what Tantra is in itself. And thirdly, I situate Tantra within the science of spirit that Hegel provides the coming to be of in the phenomenology of spirit. And then at the end, I will see what is a Hegelian Tantra and what is a Tantric Hegel. So spiritual practice. In spiritual practice, this is commonly understood as a means by which one can actualize themselves. I think from a Hegelian framework, we can understand spiritual practice to be about a path to spiritual self-knowing. And in the East, a distinction that has emerged within spiritual practice in different traditions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, and Zoroastrianism is the distinction between Sutra and Tantra. Now, Sutra is a spiritual path that is based on renunciation, and specifically the renunciation of pleasure, desires, and drives. In Sutra, you are prohibited to go into those desires and drives, and thereby you deny a part of yourself and of the body. And practical examples of this could be fasting. You're denying yourself the oral drive. Another practical example could be silent meditation, where you're retracting from the world, and also celibacy and abstaining from sex or the orgasm. And on the other hand, we have Tantra, which Tantra sees those drives and desires not to be renounced in order for one to achieve spiritual self-knowing or enlightenment, but Tantra sees those drives and desires to be a useful means that if one goes into them and works through them in a tantric realm and ritualizes these drives, that one can transform themselves spiritually. So I would say that Sutra is based on Sutra is like a conscious form of what Freud called the reality principle, where you're renouncing the pleasure principle, and Tantra is a conscious form of dealing with the pleasure principle in service of spiritual practice. So Sutra is moral. It uses the faculty of the superego, whereas Tantra is ethical in the Zizek'ian understanding, where ethical means that you live according to the notion of your own bodily desire and drives. Osho says, Tantra says, sex is the deepest form of slavery and can be used as a vehicle to achieve the greatest freedom. Poison can be used as medicine. If something deepens by awareness, it is good. If it dissipates by awareness, it is bad. If something ceases to exist by awareness, it is sin. If it grows by awareness, it is virtue. So Osho and his spiritual practice could be put into one word, and that word is meditation. And by meditating, one moves to this awareness. And Tantra sees this transformative potential in the deepest form of slavery, that is sexuality. And what does that actually mean practically? Because that was just the abstract theoretical part of it. Well, there's a tantric school right here based in the Netherlands where I live, and this is a tantra school that uses tantric rituals with the basis of its knowledge that since sex is the deepest form of slavery, and since there can be things like ego inflation, people using sex to inflate their ego, people have neediness, they're greedy for sex, they're very ashamed of their sexuality, they feel guilty when they act out upon it, they use sex as a means to disrespect, manipulate the others. So in general, people tend to be very insecure and jealous in not only sex itself, but also this becomes visible in their daily life. So the new Tantra totally breaks with Tantra in general and the new Tantra in particular totally break with the taboo of the body. However, what's crucial here is that there is no Tantra without Sutra. So if you don't have a practice of silent meditation or of fasting, or it could be whatever, then you're simply not ready for Tantra. Tantra is transformative spirituality, which means that it happens in an extremely intense and demanding environment. And this environment, the TNT provides in their workshops, which range from level 1 to 5. And level 1 is called sexual deconditioning, whereby you're working to decondition all your learned behaviors and ego patterns from society, your parents, family, friends, and also especially porn in this day for a lot of people. And level 2 is advanced sex, where you are taking all those deconditioned lessons and actually learning deeper about sex. And so level 1 is it is sexually explicit, but the clothes don't come off. You're not gonna have sex at level 1. That's not part of the exercises. Whereas in level 2, the clothes do come off, and there's sexually explicit exercises. For example, the de-armoring of the anus and of the vagina, which you can learn about more on their website and in my upcoming paper. And level 3 is sexual completion. So you are allowed and motivated to live out your most intense, deep sexual fantasies. And level 4 and 5 level 4 is about devotion, and level 5 is about the ego. You're learning to work with constructive criticism, how to take it and how to give it. And these two levels are not sexual at all. The reason why the new Tantra starts with sexuality is because it's the deepest form of slavery. We don't really learn how to mature there, since there's this taboo. So taking the totality of the body mind, we have to start with sexual maturation in tantric spiritual practice. This is a quote by Dzogchen Buddhist master Chogyal Namkhai Norbu, and he says, in Sutra, the path of renunciation, the emphasis is on giving up or renouncing negative actions and adopting positive actions, while Tantra seeks to purify or transform the negative tendencies of the body, energy, and mind into positive ones. So this is an extremely crucial difference. In Sutra, you renounce the negative. I don't want to go into my oral drive and eat like a maniac. And I adopt a positive attitude. While Tantra actually uses the supposedly negative tendency of the body to transform it into a positive tendency. Now let's see what Tantric Hegel has to say about this. Hegel says, spirit is this power not as something positive, which closes its eyes to the negative, as when we say of something that it is nothing or false, and then, having done with it, turn away and pass on to something else. On the contrary, spirit is this power only by looking the negative in the face, tarrying with it. This tarrying with the negative is the magical power that converts it into being. So immediately Tantric Hegel claims that Tantra is the magical power of spirit, whereas Sutra doesn't contain this depth that Tantra does. So let's talk about how we can situate Tantra and spiritual practice in general within the science of spirit. Now, what is spirit? It's a very ominous term that's very difficult to understand when you are trying to learn about Hegel's philosophy and reading the phenomenology of spirit. So first of all, spirit is the process of its own self-becoming, which doesn't say much to us, but it is in this process of becoming itself. It is a movement of knowing that aims to know what it is in itself. So in this movement of knowing, it is self-othering itself, or in other words, it's changing what it knowing is for itself. And by these revelations, by these transformations, which is its own doing, is its own process of becoming, it does stay self-same in its difference. So it becomes different all the time, and therein it stays self-same. And this movement is restless. You as a subject, you always strive to know more and to change your very knowing, and you cannot stop this. You're not going to be satisfied when you stop, try to stop yourself from thinking. And yeah, the magical power of spirit, like Tantric Hegel says, is Tantra. So then what is science? Well, Hegel in the phenomenology of spirit doesn't, like Dr. Lest emphasizes, he doesn't give us a foundation of science. The phenomenology of spirit is a coming to be of science, where the content, like Hegel says in the introduction, is the experience of consciousness. And the experience of consciousness is this very movement of knowing that aims to know what itself is, that changes its very nature. And science for Hegel is a discipline one lives in. It's a total science. And I argue that science provides us with a methodological way to do spiritual practice, and as a methodological spirituality itself, that again has this goal or aim of self-knowing spirit, which is for me a synonym to absolute knowing. Now, spiritual practice within the science of spirit is a scientific pursuit where the experiment is the self, and since it is the self, you take up the totality of the body mind in that method and in that experimentation. Now Hegel says, pure self-recognition in absolute otherness, this aether as such is the ground and soil of science or knowledge in general. This simple being in its existential form is the soil of science. It is thinking which has its being in spirit alone. Science on its part requires that self-consciousness should have raised itself into this aether in order to be able to live with science and in science. And so we have to understand that this is extremely radical way to conceptualize science, not only because you live with science and in science, but also because there is a ground to science, and this ground is the pure self-recognition in absolute otherness. Which brings us to Hegelian Tantra, where we can encounter this ground of science, I argue. Now, on the right hand side, you see a piece of art, a neo-tantric piece of art. You see someone meditating with their head on fire, and therein is a triad, is located the Hegelian triad. And yeah, I argue that the tantric realm that is, for example, provided by the TNT can function as could potentially function as a catalyst for a sublation of a spiritual shape. And the potentiality of that, I really want to emphasize the potentiality of that, because in this realm, you unleash the power of spirit. That is this facing, wallowing, and working through the negative. And this is what I call the self-encounter. And by facing, wallowing, and working through the negative within the tantric realm, one can relinquish their abstract universal ego identifications, like from a standpoint of immature sexuality, and raise oneself to a higher concrete universality in the sexual relational real, which is a way to say that it is an embodied way to perform the sublation and to catalyze that in the tantric realm. Now, so we have on one side, we have Tantra, and then we have Hegel. I link Tantra to the body and to what Alexander Barth, Hegelian and Tantric philosopher, calls pathos, the drives and desires that are very raw. Then on the other side, we have the mind, philosophy, and logos, which is on the side of Hegel. Now, if we bring these closer together, we get a Tantric Hegel, which is all about speculatively thinking with the negative. and in its in with the negative as spirit's actualization, working through that. And on the other hand, we have the spiritual practice that I call Hegelian Tantra. And Hegelian Tantra is a logical way to deal with pathos. And Tantric Hegel and speculative thinking is a logos that uses pathos as a motor. Or in another way, we could see that Hegel takes up the negation within his thinking and doesn't just abstractly negate it and is not just indifferent to it. So by bringing these closer together, and by going through these sublations within the tantric realm and also in spiritual practice, sutric spiritual practice, we can develop a deeper embodied knowing of concrete actuality that stays present in the moment, that doesn't flee off into picture thought, and thereby you deepen the yes, the spirit's being, like Quinn said in his presentation. It's about the exposition of spirit, and this is this happens all within the science of spirit. Now there's also this triad which we can make. So I already explained to you that Hegel provides us with the coming to be and also the ground of the science of spirit, reminding you of the fact that the ground of the science of spirit is the self-recognition in absolute otherness. So there's no satisfying substantial ground he gives there. And Zupancic here uses Lacan and Hegel's theory to, in her book, What is Sex, to postulate that the sexual relationship that we find in the real of our lives is at the most a determinate negation. She says that there is a non-relation. Sex in itself is a fundamental negativity. However, in its manifestation, there is this efficacy to it. And with that knowledge, we can go to Alexa Vartman's book called What is Sex? About modern tantric practice, and also the TNT workshops, which if we go through that spiritual practice, we form a deeper embodied concrete universal understanding of spirit, which we can then take back to Hegel's science of spirit. And by going through this process, we deepen spirit's self-knowing. How much time do I have left, by the way? Wait.
You've got 4 minutes.
Okay, 4 minutes. So yeah, that's basically all I have. You can find my work at Substack and on YouTube. And on the left-hand side, you see a meme of how I met my Hegelian boyfriend. And I've heard Cadell say before that, or like ask the question of, is the subject of absolute knowing feminine? So is there such a thing as the Hegelian girlfriend? And I think this is an interesting question, first of all, because Hegel and Zizek both are men. However, Alexa Vartman, which is the founder of the new tantric school here in the Netherlands, used to be a man and is now gender fluid and performs as a woman. So that's just an open-ended question to you guys, and thanks for listening. We can go into the questions now.
All right, I think TNT has found their philosophical their philosophical spokesperson. We got a future career here as well. So is anyone wants to ask a question for Dimitri, please raise your hand, and we have a little bit of extra time, so maybe get to a few more questions than we might otherwise. The first question I see, I'm assuming Thomas might want me to ask it, is Thomas asks, what about Dojin? I never know how to pronounce that word, but Dimitri,
yeah. So the way I see it, I recently critiqued Buddhism in the IDW forum, because I think Buddhism substantializes the non-conceptual oneness, which already Quinn went into a bit. He called it the actual non-actual non-duality. But I think this all these ancient tantric spiritual practices that Dzogchen Buddhism and other traditions provide us with are tremendously rich, and that we can also contain them within a science of spirit. So it's not like the science of spirit rejects, or like Tantric Hegel rejects Dzogchen Buddhism. Dzogchen Buddhism is very interesting as a vehicle itself, which is kind of Dzogchen language, to get to a deeper spiritual self-knowing or absolute knowing, or knowing, an embodied knowing of the concrete actuality. That's the way I see it.
All right, are there any more questions? We got a lot of applause, but a lot of people are stunned, I think, Dimitri. Max, you got your hand up?
I like all kinds of questions, whether it's like very practically about tantric spiritual practice, or introductory questions, or
What do you think is the future of Tantra?
Now that's a great question. I mean, so Alexander Barth says it's the future of Tantra is Hegelian, and I definitely think that I truly stand by what I say, and that I think Hegel and the science of spirit provides us with the best method of tantric spiritual practice. Now, I have followed 2 workshops at the TNT, and together that was 6 days in the end of March. I've read a few books on Tantra right now, but I'm by no means an expert on it. What's interesting about the new Tantra is that, so you have the traditional Tantra coming from Dzogchen and older traditions, and then we also have new Tantra, which is kind of could be more New Age, or also Osho. And the new Tantra explicitly says that we are not traditional nor neo Tantra. We are modern Tantra for the 21st century. And I think they're totally correct here. I think the lessons that they take from science, from psychoanalysis, and yeah, it's the new Tantra is not. It's also for atheists, you know. It's very concrete, and there's no. You don't have to believe any spiritual stuff or even philosophical stuff to get a lot out of that. So I think they have, I mean, they have, I believe they exist for more than 10 years or so, and they're still going strong. Their workshops are fully booked every time, and they don't even have to actively promote themselves.
All right, great. And Quinn, you're up next.
Awesome, Dimitri. I guess my question is, how do you see, because you emphasized this dimension of confronting negativity within in kind of the sexual encounter, just within the tantric space like that, with jealousy and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious how you see that self-relating negativity. What's the relationship between that and kind of like the ecstatic sexual experience, or the ecstatic tantric experience? How do you see those two related?
Yeah, it's still very much something I'm thinking through, because it's true, like in these tantric workshops, it could be that you go there and that you just have like have an extremely good time, but actually I don't think that's true, because they do have like exercises whereby you really go very deep into your into negativity. So yeah, well, for me, I say about this week, for me at the tantric workshops, it was the most positively intense week of my life. I've never experienced anything like that, and I've not used you don't use any drugs or alcohol at the workshop at all, but it was totally like I I was high for many parties and exercises and everything that went down there. and that's, I mean, that's in itself, I think, a higher concrete embodied concrete universality, because you're being encountered with something that you've never known before that your body could do.
All right, Jason, you want to go next?
Yeah. Sorry. Can I get your views on premature ejaculation and Platonism and how it relates to Tantra and Hegel? Thank you.
So, well, I should say that. So, if one wants to go into Tantra, one should have.
It's a practical question, by the way.
Yeah. So, if one wants to go into Tantra, one has to practice with non-coming, not going into the peak orgasm. For men, that means not ejaculating, and for women, that means not going into the clitoral orgasm. And I think it's an interesting question of like what happens, like what is premature ejaculation? Because what I've learned from my tantric teachers at the school is that like even the tantric gigolos there were premature ejaculators, you know. So it's not something innate bodily, it's very much a virtual kind of thing. And I think it's I think it's really a matter of neurowiring with porn, and you know, the excessive nature of this imagery that you cannot contain it anymore. And I think really this for men, the tantric spiritual practice is also about developing your presence, like the masculine presence, that you're able to contain the feminine so that it can flourish. So a premature ejaculator, or someone who has this problem, which is, you know, it's a rich, it's not like we look down upon it, we tantric people. Like it's a way you can actually learn a lot from that and sexually mature in that sense. So yeah, I think yeah, that's basically what I think about it.
Yeah, thank you. That's very interesting, and I think it's fascinating how modern science, have little to say also about this dysfunction. You know, they just prescribe antidepressants. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's it.
maybe science is premature ejaculation.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, coming to an image of non-being.
Yeah.
There are some questions in the chat. I'll first
Oh, yeah.
ask Thomas's, which is, if Tantra is transformation, Sutra is renunciation, then what is, I don't know if you already answered that, but again, Jojin, you pronounce the name, you know how to pronounce the name there, Dimitri.
Wait, where is the question in Tantra?
It's just up a bit. If Tantra is transformation, Sutra is renunciation, then what is?
Oh, what is Dzogchen?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think Dzogchen Buddhism is a tradition that is both sutric and tantric, right? So that's what Dzogchen is about, and it utilizes both these forms of these two pathos of spiritual spiritual practice.
It creates the container for the transformation, right?
Yeah,
You
and
create a sutric container for the Tantra.
yeah.
Or
Yeah,
maybe.
exactly. I would say that, like, the Sutra, that's why you start with Sutra, because Sutra is like the conscious reality principle, and it's religion, but Tantra is religion inside of religion, that requires that you first go into let's say the religious layer. But you
Right.
edge, in my paper I make the point that Tantra, and in the tantric realm, you're edging the absolute. So if we read the phenomenology of spirit, of course, the last 3 chapters are spirit, religion, and then absolute knowing. And Tantra is really in that realm of like oscillating between religion and absolute knowing, edging with the absolute, and being in the intensity of that all.
Great. There's another question from Olsul MJ03, who says, what do you think is the main most common misunderstanding of Tantra and why?
Well, I think it's the New Age stuff. I think that Tantra can be, and also I think Buddhism really is not New Age. I think that's it's a big misunderstanding, and I also think Tantra is not about hedonism, but it's also not about asceticism. It's like some people, they hear about Tantra and they hear, oh, you're not gonna ejaculate during sex, so what's the point of it? And then other people hear like, oh, you guys just wanna, just like sex obsessed perverts, which some of us, kind of are, but it's not. Tantra is not about that in itself. So I think Tantra is a means, and Tantra is not about sex as an end. It just uses sex to get to spiritual self-knowing. And I think that when you get to that point of absolute knowing or actual knowing, that really, for Osho, would be a tantric state of being, where you have a total orgasm of being. For him, I wouldn't even be tantric because I'm not ready yet. Like, for me to actually be tantric, I would that's like Tantra is a state of enlightenment for Osho.
Yeah, that's a really good description there, Dimitri. And if anyone's interested, there's a newspaper clipping that Osho took out when he set up a little commune in Portland, where he described that exact thing, that Tantra is a means. It's not about sex as an end, but really you have to go through sex to get to the spiritual self-knowing. So that's, though I think we have very quickly, if you can, there's another question and then we have to stop, but it's from Arjun Azad. I hope says what, okay, let me read the whole thing. So in the Tantra, it seems, okay, so you want to, do you know the question? So in the Tantra, it seems
I just read it.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, it's a great question, and honestly, a lot of these questions I go into depth. I answer them in depth in my paper. So what I say in my paper is that when you go merely on a sutric path, is that there is a spiritual impasse, because eventually in the phenomenology we go beyond the moral worldview, and I believe that's in the chapter on spirit. So I think that with sutra, with only having sutric spiritual practice, you're risking to end up with a repression that doesn't make a authentic and creative sublimation of your sexual energy possible to live a total, intense, and really creative and artistic life.
That's really well said, Dimitri, and that's an end to yet another fantastic presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.